Russia is intensifying its attack on key cities in Ukraine's south and that massive convoy of tanks north creeping toward the capital, Kyiv.
As the fighting rages on, the situation on the ground is growing more dire. Ukrainian officials say Russia has agreed on humanitarian corridors for civilians looking to escape. More than 1 million have made it out already, many heartbroken to leave home.
I'm adoring my city. For me, it's best city. So beautiful, with a lot of parks and cinema and theater. And now everything broke. It's crazy. There is everything broke. Everything.
After a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday, French President Emmanuel Macron is now warning that the worst is yet to come. With negotiations going nowhere, a growing humanitarian crisis, and advancing Russian troops, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had this message.
It's not about I want to talk with Putin. I think I have to talk with Putin. The world has to talk with Putin because there are no other ways to stop this war.
We begin our coverage this morning with that news that Russian forces have captured Europe's largest nuclear power plant after Russian shelling ignited a fire at the facility. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin reports from western Ukraine.
Hey, Joe and Savannah, all eyes on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which supplies about a quarter of this country's power, now under Russian occupation after fierce fighting between Ukrainian and Russian forces yesterday. A fire broke out at a training building on the site. That fire has since been extinguished, and according to officials, radiation levels remain stable. This as Russian forces continue to occupy the port city of Kherson, a city of some 300,000, the first city to fall to Russian forces in Putin's war. We've been speaking to residents there who are absolutely terrified. Yesterday was the first day they felt safe enough to leave their homes. We're speaking to one resident who wants to be known as Jimmy. He asked that we conceal his identity for fear of Russian reprisal. He described what he saw. Take a listen.
We all took a walk today, and what we've seen were deserted streets, queues at ATM machines. Maybe 3% of all shops were open, and they wouldn't have enough food in them. Despite some bombing, which happened during the takeover, I could call it a silent takeover. We probably lost our town to the enemy, but majority thinks it's a temporary, and we have to hold on until the Ukrainian army frees us.
I was speaking to another man here in Lviv who is very worried about his mother. She's in Kherson. He says that she's been working and helping the military, and he's very concerned she's going to be detained. He doesn't know how she's going to get out. Right now in Lviv, he's trying to get his wife and children over the border into Poland, and then he's going to make his way back to Kherson to try and save his mother. One of many desperate stories we're hearing about in Ukraine. Guys.
All right, Aaron, thank you. Let's get more on that nuclear plant attack with Andrew Weber. He's a senior fellow at the Council on Strategic Risks and the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs under President Obama. Andrew, thanks for joining us. We should remind our viewers this fire has been put out. Authorities say the site has been made safe. Still, this is Europe's largest nuclear power plant. Can we breathe much of a sigh of relief here? And just how dangerous could this have been?
No, we can't breathe a sigh of relief. This was a totally planned attack on a nuclear power plant, actually 6 reactors at this facility. It provides 25% of the power to Ukraine. And to attack it, apparently, including with shells and cause a fire, it's absolutely outrageous. So this is potentially very, very dangerous. Imagine the reactor staff now. Essentially, they're hostages, and we have to rely on them to safely operate the plant. So this was just another example of Russia's 19th century brutal form of warfare that has to stop.
What is your biggest fear here now moving forward, especially with this plant?
Well, the biggest fear with this plant is that the operators won't be on site, or they were killed or injured, and I'm sure that the Russian military did not bring along a staff to operate such a facility. So if their intent is to shut off a big chunk of Ukraine's electricity, it will take skilled staff to turn the reactor down in a safe way. And I don't believe they have a plan for that. So it is a risky time. And thank goodness so far there doesn't appear to be any radiation release.
Andrew, Ukraine has a couple other nuclear plants dotted around the country. Do you think Russia could be eyeing those other sites as part of its strategy? And how do we know, does this capture benefit Russia's plans?
Well, it's not unusual in military campaigns to take out a country's electricity and power supply to reduce their fighting capabilities. But it is very unusual to go after nuclear power plants. So this is really unprecedented and extremely dangerous. And we need to have a ceasefire, and the plant needs to be given back to Ukrainian control so that the skilled staff there can operate it safely.
Andrew Weber, thanks so much for joining us this morning to help us better understand this unfolding situation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, of course, all this fighting is impacting real people. Russia's invasion has upended the lives of Ukrainians, forcing them out of their homes and into any kind of shelter to stay safe. Z. Gaiman has been taking shelter inside a church basement in Ukraine with her 2 children for a week, and she joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time, especially right now. So first, just tell us, how are you? How are your children doing right now? And do you feel safe where you are?
Safe is a relative term right now. We're alive and well. I keep posting on Facebook the updates, and that's the standard phrase that I say, that we're alive, because there is no guarantee we will wake up in the morning. The shelling continues pretty much all day. There are 8 strike alarms pretty much all day long. Right now is actually an airstrike alarm going off right here. The families are scared. Many don't know whether they should leave or stay. So that's the main question that many people are facing, because many family husbands can't leave because there is general mobilization, and many people don't want to leave without their spouses. So for me personally, that's my choice to stay here, because my husband is currently serving in territorial defense. So it's very important for me to be close. And yeah, especially in time like that.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about your husband. I know he did volunteer to be part of the Ukrainian defense team. How's that been for you? I mean, I know we're all looking on just in awe of the resilience of your country, of Ukrainian people. What's it like, though, personally right now? Have you spoken to your husband at all? And just how's this impacted you and your kids?
We try to, I have seen him 3 times since the start of the war last Thursday. Both time, like all 3 times, it was just for a few minutes when he stopped by for supplies like sleeping bags for his team, because at first they were really not supplied with basic necessities. Now the situation changed, thank God, but it's hard. Every 2 to 3 days, I break down crying because I just have no idea whether the next strike will hit where he is. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. What's it been like trying to talk to your kids about what's going on?
I try to be honest. I try to tell them that this is war. But at the same time, I try to tell them the reasoning behind us staying and why we're staying here, that Dad is doing okay. He keeps sending messages, even if it's a smiley, whenever he has access to his phone and whenever he has time. So we try to manage it like that.
Z. Gaiman, thank you so much. We are thinking about you. We will check in with you. And as you said, it's a relative term right now, but stay safe, and we'll be thinking about your family.
Thank you. Yep.
Let's head to Moscow and NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez. So, Raf, in televised remarks yesterday, Russian President Putin said his military operation in Ukraine is going to plan. But inside Ukraine, that does not exactly seem to be the case, especially in the first few days of this. What else is Putin saying about this invasion so far?
Joe, Vladimir Putin presented a version of reality yesterday that just does not match up with what our teams are seeing on the ground. He talked about Russian forces fighting against neo-Nazi Ukrainians being supported by mercenaries from the Middle East who are holding Ukrainian civilians hostage. Now, what we are seeing is Ukrainian population rallying against this Russian invasion, in some cases literally throwing themselves in front of Russian tanks to stop their advance. One of the most discouraging notes we heard from President Putin yesterday wasn't actually in that speech, but it was in a readout of a call he had with President Emmanuel Macron of France, where he said this special military operation, that's how the Kremlin refers to the invasion of Ukraine, will continue until all of its goals are met. And the reason that's so discouraging is Russian and Ukrainian negotiators are meeting, and in theory, they are trying to hammer out some kind of ceasefire, some kind of peace deal. But President Putin seems to be suggesting that his forces will continue to advance, and he says he will not allow the Ukrainians to play for time at the negotiating table. Joe?
Yeah, let's talk more about those talks between Russian and Ukrainian officials. Not a lot of progress. Both countries did tentatively agree on establishing what are known as humanitarian corridors. Tell us, what exactly does that mean, and do we have any idea if more talks could be coming?
Yeah, so humanitarian corridors would basically be kind of localized ceasefires in very specific areas that would be designed to allow civilians to leave the area and to allow food and medical aid to come in. Now, there's a certain irony to humanitarian corridors. It obviously sounds extremely desirable, and from the perspective of the Ukrainian government, they want those corridors to try to get their people safe. But the Russians may also have a vested interest in these humanitarian corridors because they ideally would like as few civilians inside of the Ukrainian cities as possible, because that way they can attack, they can use heavier weaponry without being as concerned about killing civilians and drawing in the world's condemnation. In terms of the next round of talks, round 3, the Russians say there will be another round sometime next week. We don't have exact timing. We don't know where. Joe?
All right, Raf Sanchez in Moscow. Raf, thank you.
NBC News military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs joins us now. Colonel, good morning. So I do want to start with what happened overnight at that nuclear plant in southern Ukraine. So it caught fire, as we've mentioned, during this heavy Russian shelling. And after it was put out, Ukrainian nuclear officials said the plant is now occupied by Russian forces. This is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, and it's one of several in Ukraine. How concerned should we be about this latest development? I mean, when you hear that this is the type of site that they've taken over, what does it make you think?
Well, there were two things right away. First of all is the violence with which it was taken. And Andrew Weber, your previous guest, who's an expert in these things, enumerated a number of horrifying things that could happen and could have happened. Now that the Russians have it, the most significant thing from that standpoint is their inability to actually run it properly, and the fact that they need the Ukrainian experts there in order to continue to run it. Don't forget, I can't remember what percentage he said this of the electricity in Ukraine it delivers, but it's a significant percentage of it. So whether to continue to run it, that requires Ukrainian expertise, because the Russians certainly don't have it, or to shut it down, that requires Ukrainian expertise. It is not entirely clear whether or not the Ukrainians who are capable of running it or shutting it down are there. The second thing is that if they're not there, it's a very, very dangerous situation. You don't just turn a switch and turn it off, because that could cause a nuclear incident. The other thing is that the Russians probably want to shut it down because they want to deprive all of Ukraine with utilities. And so their objective is to shut it down altogether, which is why they wanted to secure it in the first place. And so it's very concerning. With respect to the videos that we've seen, we saw tracers, the firefight that was taking place there on the site. That large ball of light that you saw coming down, that was an aerial flare dropped by aircraft so that the Russians can see the Ukrainians who were defending it. That's a fire. Its whole purpose is to light it up, and when it hits the ground, it sets fire to things. It's an extremely reckless and dangerous situation, still, because the Russians are not capable of running this site, Samantha.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have another question for you. This one's actually from a viewer, not about nuclear power, but nuclear weapons. So President Putin, we remember, ordered Russia's nuclear forces to be put on high alert. Now, a viewer, Jamie Diaz, asks, what if the Kremlin does end up using nuclear bombs in Ukraine or any other countries? What would be the next move for the UN or the United States? Obviously, this is an extreme next steps down the road. But what do you say to that, Colonel?
Well, the UN doesn't have anything at its disposal, so we can forget about that. I don't think we have a plan B with respect to the use of tactical nuclear weapons by the Russians. I guess we can impose more economic strictures on them. I think our allies and others who have not yet done so will do so. I think he's disinclined to use weapons of any kind, tactical nuclear weapons, and certainly not strategic nuclear weapons. Among other things, his great pal at the moment, who's keeping some distance, is China. And China has already started to sort of distance themselves. I think that it's always possible that he may use tactical nuclear weapons. I think it's highly unlikely.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, thank you so much. As always, we so appreciate your analysis when you join us.
Sure.
As Russia intensifies those air and ground assaults against Ukrainian cities, more than 1 million refugees have already fled the country. UNICEF estimates children make up half that number, a number that is growing by the hour. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now from the Poland-Ukraine border, where so many of these displaced families are arriving. Ellison, good morning to you. So the UN has estimated this war could ultimately displace 4 million Ukrainians. So what preparations are being made there to try and take care of so many people? How organized is the response?
It's very much a work in progress, and I'll break down a little for you some of what we've seen here. But you mentioned how so many of the refugees are believed to be children. That's what we've seen as we've been out here the last few days reporting. This is our 5th border stop on the Poland-Ukrainian border, and you see all these faces of children, and you talk to some of them. Imagine with me for a minute that you are 8 or 9 years old. You have been just a few days ago at home playing with friends, drawing with chalk on the sidewalk, and then in an instant you are forced to go and hide in bomb shelters. You have to frantically pack everything you own or what little you can carry with you, say goodbye to your brother who is then going to stay and fight in a war, and then flee with your mother to a completely new country. For most of us, we cannot even imagine that. But here in this makeshift refugee camp, that is a story that many people have different versions of. We met one little girl in this tent. She's 8 years old. Her name is Angelina. She was living in Kyiv, and she had to flee here. Listen to what she told us.
What was it like for you when you were at home and you heard all the noises?
І як тобі було вдома, коли почалася оця страшна подія?
Дуже сильно страшно.
It was really scary. And then, when my mommy comforted me, it was all good.
What did you say to your brother when he...
Що ти сказала своїм братам, коли ти залишала їх в Україні?
Я сказала своєму брату,
I told my brother,
я тебе очень
my brother,
сильно люблю.
I really love you. I love you very, very much.
You're very brave. Did you know
Ти
you were
дуже
so
смілива.
brave?
Ти знаєш, що ти дуже смілива? Yes, I am.
What do you want other kids who are
Що ти
watching
хочеш
this to know?
сказати іншим дітям, які будуть тебе слухати зараз?
Я хочу, щоб вони не переживали.
I want them not to be afraid and not to worry. I want them to listen to their parents, because their parents love them more than anyone else.
This is one of the most organized assistance areas we've seen. We watched as electricians came and ran cables up every single power pole, putting in electrical outlets so people can charge their phones, so they can get heat to these tents. Most of these tents, they are heated. There is food, coats, water, really most anything anyone would need immediately. We were speaking to the people who are organizing and running this site. This is done by the local government. And they said in terms of food, in terms of blankets, strollers, you can see how many strollers there are there. Another reminder of how many children are impacted by this. They say they have enough donations, but the biggest challenge right now is transportation. People are coming to these border crossings and they might not have family or anyone they can go stay with in cities. They need to get to other areas where there are more places for them to stay, but they need rides to do that. Warsaw is about 4 hours away from here, so having transportation and drivers to take people, that's a huge hurdle. Joe?
So many hurdles, but I concur. Angelina is very brave. Ellison, thank you so much for that report. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.